French freelance journalist Nicolas Henin is lucky to be alive. For now, he lives and works in Paris. But he spent years covering the disintegration of Iraq, and then Libya, and then Syria. And for 10 long months, until his release in April last year, he was held as a hostage by the fanatical followers of IS, the self-styled Islamic State. Crammed in with up to 20 others in a series of underground cells in the Syrian cities of Aleppo and Raqqa. 5 of them, 2 Britons and 3 Americans, are now dead. Of the others, all but 1 are free. But none of them knew at the time how long their captivity would last or how it would end.
It's a lot about boredom and also fear. But I would say that boredom is probably the most important feeling, even before fear. We were stuck in a small room, in a very small place, and we had, well, often no more than 1 square meter for each of us. We had very little light, with nothing. The only thing we had to entertain us was what every one of us took with him here, in his memory.
Memory and imagination.
D'un jeu, une quasi-psychanalyse animalière qu'on avait mise en place, un petit groupe.
Since his return to Paris, Henin has become a minor celebrity.
Cet emmêlement de pinceau au sommet, les traits réguliers de Nicolas Henin sont apparus dans vos journaux, sur vos écrans de télévision.
Partly on the basis of a children's book that he conceived in his cell with illustrations by fellow hostage Pierre Torres. Will Daddy Hedgehog come home? The book started, Henin explains, with a game some of the hostages played to pass the time.
L'idée, c'était quel animal t'incarne bien, quel animal aimerais-tu être. Et puis moi, à un moment, j'avais évoqué le hérisson, et puis ça avait provoqué un déclic chez Pierre qui m'avait dit le soir même, tu sais Nicolas, il y a un truc quand même très sympa avec le hérisson, c'est qu'il rentre toujours à la maison. Et l'histoire, à ce moment-là, m'avait paru quand même très enthousiasmante.
In his book, Daddy Hedgehog is taken away in a picnic basket and after many adventures, finds his way home. In real life, Nicolas Henin, Pierre Torres, and 2 other French journalists were reunited with their families just over a year ago. In fact, in the space of a few months last year, 15 of the 20 or so hostages who crammed Nicolas Henin's cell were freed. Journalists and aid workers from 7 other European countries, as well as France. All their governments deny that they pay ransoms.
The only thing that I know for fact is what President Hollande, the French president, told me when I arrived in Paris, right after my release. He told me, looking me into the eyes, France did not pay.
But according to a much-quoted series of articles published last year in the New York Times, France does pay multi-million-dollar ransoms, and so do most other European governments. The author of those articles is Rukmini Callimachi, who's been researching hostage-taking in the Middle East and North Africa for years.
They've created a system of proxies that allows them, in some very literal interpretation of that question, to claim that they haven't paid, especially in Africa. A European government would send the money and disguise it as a humanitarian payment, and then officials in the country would then pass it forward.
But as far as your sources tell you, Is it true to say that the ultimate payer of most of these ransoms are European taxpayers?
Absolutely.
By August of last year, the only hostages left in the cell in Raqqa were American and British, the nations that won't pay ransoms. Then the United States and its allies, including Britain and Australia, launched airstrikes against Islamic State. Between August and October last year, Islamic State posted graphic videos of the murder of 5 hostages. 3 from the United States and 2 from Britain.
I call on my friends, family, and loved ones.
The first victim was American photojournalist James Foley.
I wish I had more time. I wish I could have the hope of freedom and seeing my family once again. But that ship has sailed.
A few months after your release, there was that gruesome series of public beheadings of people that you must have known intimately.
Very intimately, because we had a time of move from a jail to another, and it was all this move was well, very improvised to prevent us from escaping. They handcuffed us by pair, and I was handcuffed with James Foley 24/7 for a week. So this gives you an idea of how intimate we became. You know, in a group like this, when you are so much missing space and under pressure and stress, it's normal that there are arguments between us. And actually, I think that every one of us had, at some point, arguments with every other, except for Jim. Jim managed to stay friendly with everyone all the time.
This is James Foley for Global Post, reporting from Benghazi, Libya. The city have been under heavy attack for most of the day on Saturday, and fighting has been fierce there.
So we're seeing a lot of RPGs.
Shortly after filing this report from Benghazi, Libya in March 2011, James Foley was captured by pro-Gaddafi forces. His then employer, the Boston website Global Post, managed to get him out 6 weeks later.
The fight for Aleppo began
But in 2012, Foley insisted on going into the field again, to Aleppo, where the Syrian civil war was raging.
The fighting continues day and night. Both sides are sending in reinforcements.
This time, he was freelancing. But the Global Post bought many of his stories.
On location Aleppo, this is James Foley for Global Post.
Set up in Boston in 2009, Global Post specializes in exactly the kind of frontline reporting Jim Foley did. Founder and CEO Phil Balboni admits that it's struggling to break even.
Yeah. All right.
Hello there.
Good morning.
But when in November 2012 Foley disappeared, Balboni didn't hesitate to spend money trying to find him.
We had people on the ground on the Turkish-Syria border within a week, and we didn't find Jim for almost exactly a year. That was November of 2013, and very soon after that, the first email from the kidnappers arrived.
The hostage takers put a price on Foley's head, 100 million euros.
We didn't believe that that could be a credible, serious offer. I mean, 100 million euros is a stunning amount of money. At that time, it was about 135 million US dollars. No one was capable of paying a ransom like that. No government would be likely to do it.
But there was an upside. In the same email, the kidnappers invited the Foleys to submit 3 questions to prove their son was alive.
Jim's brother Michael worked very hard on crafting those questions so that they couldn't be researched on the internet or on Facebook or something like that, you could only know them, it would only be in Jim's head. So off they went, and a few days later they came back and they were all answered absolutely perfectly correctly. So we knew without any doubt that these people had Jim Foley.
And when he was returned to his cell in Aleppo, Jim Foley knew, after 13 months of silence, that his captors were in touch with his family.
It was crying. It was so happy it was crying. Okay, because when you are asked for a proof of life question, it's not only a proof of life of you sent to your relative, but it's also a proof that the outside world still exists and knows that you're alive. The proof of life still, yes, gives you hope.
But for Jim Foley's family, hope soon gave way to frustration. In December 2013, after just 5 emails, all communication from his captors abruptly stopped. And from the FBI here in Washington, despite its access to all the United States' formidable intelligence and diplomatic resources, they heard nothing either.
They had communications intercept, they had aerial surveillance, they had almost certainly human resources on the ground in Syria. So there was, without doubt, a lot of information that was available to them. Nothing in the entire period of time that Jim was alive, not a single piece of actionable information ever came back to us.
And according to Rukmini Callimachi, as winter gave way to spring last year, there was no communication either between the US government and the hostage takers.
There was very quickly a very big difference in how the French and how the Spanish and in how some of the other governments responded. Whereas the Americans, were dragging their feet and basically telling Mrs. Foley, no, we don't pay, ask for more proof of life, etc. The others were going into negotiation mode and saying, okay, 100 million, 50 million, that's out of the question. Let's talk more reasonably.
By April, the European hostages were coming home. But from Washington, the families of the American hostages still heard nothing. Slowly, they realized that their government was doing nothing either. What most of the families decided to do was to start raising the millions of dollars they thought might get the hostages freed. A White House official warned them that if they did so, they might face prosecution.
I think the thing that particularly infuriated Diane and John Foley was the threat that was delivered by a member of the National Security Council on a phone call, a conference call, with other hostage families. But we were always assured at the operating level by the FBI that there would be no sanctioning of the family and that they would actually help.
The mixed messages from government only confused the families of hostages already faced with raising huge sums of money. Kayla Muller's family was growing desperate. The altruistic young American had crossed into Syria from Turkey with her Syrian boyfriend, intent on doing good, in October 2013. She'd been kidnapped within days, and her captors were now demanding more than $6 million for her life. There was no way the family could pay. That's not a problem that affects the families of French hostages. The French Foreign Ministry here on the Quai d'Orsay is responsible for hostage negotiations for all French citizens. They refused our request for an interview. There's nothing to be said, they told us. After all, France has made it clear on many occasions that it does not pay ransoms. So did the family of Nicolas Henin feel like the American families that it was compelled to try to raise millions of euros or to enter into negotiations for his release?
No, because French government does not allow a private person to pay ransom or to negotiate, even to discuss with hostage takers. So my family, I'm extremely happy to be French, because I'm very happy of the way the French government handles this kind of situations.
Here's the central paradox. The French government, and for that matter, every other European government I know of, insists that it doesn't pay ransoms. And yet, here you are.
Let's not be naive. I know that there have been a compensation given to the group for my release. I just don't know what it was.
But somebody surely paid.
Paid or gave something else, I don't know.
Comme tous les députés sont élus par 140 000 électeurs. Donc ici, exactement 19 300.
I met Alain Marsaud in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. French citizens, wherever they may live, have a vote and a member of parliament. Marsaud represents those who live in East Africa, from Somalia to Cape Town, and throughout the Middle East. He's a member of the centre-right opposition, and he's one of the few French politicians prepared to discuss the delicate subject of hostage ransoms. After all, it's a topic of deep interest to his constituents.
Le gouvernement français dit qu'il ne paye pas de rançon. C'est vrai, le gouvernement français ne paye pas de rançon. Mais lorsque nous avons des otages français, quelqu'un paye une rançon. Somebody pay, I don't know who, but somebody pay. It's impossible to make somebody free without paying. When you are French, perhaps if you are Australian, American, or British, it's possible. French, no, we pay.
The concrete evidence of just how much European governments have been paying emerged 2 years ago from one of the remotest spots on Earth, the Sahara Desert city of Timbuktu. In late 2012, the French army intervened to check the advance of Islamist rebels who called themselves Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. They were threatening to take over the entire nation of Mali. In January 2013, the French pushed the Islamists out of Mali's northernmost city, Timbuktu.
So this is what they did when they left?
Yes, exactly that.
When foreign correspondent Eric Campbell reached the fabled city that March, he found that the Al-Qaeda fighters had destroyed much of Timbuktu's precious library.
The borderman put fire here, and you see, you can see how it's all manuscript for 15th century.
The 15th century, they just destroyed them?
Yes.
But ironically, the Islamists did not destroy their own documents before they left the city. Rukmini Callimachi, who was then heading the Associated Press's bureau in West Africa, got to Timbuktu a few weeks before Eric Campbell.
I found thousands and thousands of pages of documents that these people had left behind.
The documents proved beyond doubt that hostage-taking had become big business for Al-Qaeda branches in North Africa and in Yemen. For example, one was a letter from Nazir al-Wuhayshi, the head of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, to his fellow militants in North Africa.
He talks about how, in his own experience in Yemen, 50% of their operating budget was coming from the spoils of kidnapping. I mean, it's stunning. You know, they, in their own words, they're making clear that kidnapping and ransoms that are always paid by European governments have become their lifeline.
I've been taken hostage on the 21st of
Ransoms paid for hostages like Austrian Dominik Neubauer.
I appeal to the Yemeni government, to the Austrian government, and to all other governments concerned, and to the European Union, to give them what they want. Otherwise, they will kill me 7 days after this video is published.
Neubauer was kidnapped in December 2012 in the middle of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. With him were a Finnish couple, Leila and Ate Kaleva.
Suddenly we understood that there were men standing at the door, pointing at us with their guns.
Then we just got to the ground because I thought there might be some shooting. But then I saw the guys were taking you into the car, so I realized that they're going to kidnap us.
The gunmen were thugs who sold their 3 prisoners to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP. For 4 months, they endured the bizarre life of a hostage.
For the most part, nothing happens. So you're just lying there, and absolutely nothing happens. So if you're not careful, your mind can go into all kinds of circles about the worst-case scenarios.
You can't never know what's going to happen the next day or even later the same day. And of course, it's a very high-stress situation. I think that it's a lot about then just choosing that you need to believe that you are going to get out alive.
And sure enough, in May 2013, they did get out alive. The United States Treasury has said that a $20 million ransom was paid for 4 hostages in Yemen, including Neubauer and the Kalevas, possibly by the government of Yemen's neighbor, Oman. The Kalevas returned safely to Helsinki 2 years ago, but like all the hostages I've talked to, they insist that they don't know anything about what was done to secure their freedom.
It would be nice to get a big picture of it.
Yeah.
I think I would be the most interested.
We
with
have
Leila.
been thinking quite a lot about this, what has happened and how things have gone, but you can't really know.
Do you think that somebody paid a ransom for you?
To my understanding, Finland has not paid any ransom, and Finland is part of the international agreements not paying any ransom, and that's my understanding. So.
But surely, after all, you're here, somebody must have paid.
What I believe is that the guys didn't release us just because they were suddenly feeling sympathetic or regretting that they were doing this hostage taking. So, but apart from that, I couldn't really say anything about this. I'm just happy to be alive. I don't really care about the rest. And I'm happy that my wife is alive too.
The most important thing for us is that we are here, back in Finland, and we are alive, and we are healthy. So after that, it doesn't really matter what has happened.
But it does matter deeply to the grieving families of dead British and American hostages. Stung by their criticism, the Obama administration has reviewed its hostage policy. The government will no longer threaten to prosecute families who try to pay ransoms for American hostages held overseas. But the bedrock policy, that the US government does not pay ransoms itself, hasn't changed. Do you think the policy should be changed?
You know, it's really a problem from hell. I mean, if you pay, I think there's no question that if you pay, you are perpetuating the problem. If nobody paid, we would not be sitting here having this conversation. At the same time, is it okay, to let innocent people die in this most horrific of ways? It's a pretty bleak prospect for Americans that are taken captive by these groups.
James Foley, Stephen Sotloff, Peter Kassig, all beheaded. And in February this year, IS announced that Kayla Muller had been killed by an Allied air raid and sent her family incontrovertible evidence of her death.
We have 4 dead young Americans, and all of the European hostages are alive, all of them, with their families. And that's a stark difference. The US and UK governments need to reflect on the outcome and not just the simple policy that they can hold up and try to feel proud of. I mean, the outcome here was not good, and it needs to be better.
Shortly after her death was announced, a candle-lit vigil was held for Kayla Muller in her hometown of Prescott, Arizona. The Obama administration's review of its hostage policy has yet to be completed.